Romans, this is one I've heard a lot. Romans chapter 14, we'll just start with 14:4. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Yea, he shall abide, he shall be holden up, for God is able to make him stand. One man esteems one day above another, another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. So in other words, what this is saying, and what we are told this is saying, is that it doesn't actually matter what day you rest or what day you observe. You don't have to observe the Sabbath at all, or you could observe the Sabbath, or you could observe every day. So this obviously shows us that the importance of the Sabbath day, at the very least, greatly diminished during the time of the New Testament, because it was something that was off of conviction, kind of like this earlier in this very same chapter. It says, "For one believes that he may eat all things; another who is weak eateth herbs. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him that eateth not judges him that eateth, for God has received him." So God has received these people who do not keep the Sabbath, and it's more of a subjective thing of what where your conscience is at. How would you respond to that?
Yeah. This is the other go-to passage that a lot of people go to, and again, on face value, you kind of see, okay, man, that looks like that's what it is. We're not to judge one another. Love would cover that, and so if someone wants to observe that day, great, that's good for them. And another person wants to observe a different day, okay, good, that's great for them. My ultimate is love. That's what I should do, is just love people, whether they want to observe or observe. I'm not to be the Holy Spirit for other people. And I know there's a lot of good, well-meaning Christians that would, look at that, and again, their heart is in the right place. My concern then is, have you actually wrestled with the text and the context of what Paul is saying? Because what we're doing here is we're saying that this commandment that is one of the Decalogue is no longer, and there's no explicit reference in this text that says that this is talking about the Sabbath. Now, obviously, just like you read, you can impose that it's talking about any day, which would include the Sabbath. So that's what a lot of people take, is that it must include the Sabbath, or why would Paul say it? But if you go back to the verse 14, chapter 1, so in the same context, and in chapters and verse markings, I know you probably agree, are not inspired, and in some cases, the person that put these together gets it right, and sometimes they get it wrong in terms of like the arguments there. But chapter 14 does start a new argument for Paul, and he starts by saying, "Him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful, disputable things," is what he says. Not to doubtful or disputable things. Now, would Paul, as a Pharisee of Pharisees, trained in the Torah, ever say that Sabbath is a disputable thing? And then again, you have to have the whole context of the Old Testament and how many times God reprimands Israel for not observing the Sabbath, and how much he emphasizes it all throughout the Old Testament. To now come to Paul, who has to take a Nazirite vow in Acts 21 because he was being pressured and said, from his fellow Jews, saying, a lot of people are saying that you are not keeping the law. So what does Paul do? I'm going to take a Nazirite vow, and I'm going to prove that I keep the law in everything. So the biggest issue is Paul. Paul is brilliant, but the problem is that we are so far removed from that culture and that context and our Old Testaments. Most of us don't know our Old Testaments well enough. And I would even throw myself in that camp. I'm not saying I'm the authority on the Old Testament. There's so much there to mine that we do not understand, because most people, and a lot of pastors are even telling people, like, the Old Testament doesn't matter. It's all done away with. Now we just got to focus on the New Testament. So So that's a miss. But, so Paul would not ever say that the Sabbath is a doubtful or disputable situation. Then he goes into, for one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eats herbs. Okay, so he's not even talking about days yet. He's talking about eating. And if you read the flow, I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but maybe, he actually does this. He does food, days, and then food again. So diet, days, diet. That's the flow of 14, at least until verse 10 or 11. And so the context here is not the Sabbath, because it's not explicit there. It's actually on the fasting days that the Jewish community did. And those were oral traditions that were handed down, that they said you had to take a couple days and fast. There were also people that felt like they could not eat meat sacrificed to idols. And so this is the area of contention that Paul is wrestling with. And just I'll read this and just look at through this lens, even for a moment with me, and say, is Paul just addressing diet days and meat sacrifice to idols? And then you hear him say this: him that is weak in the faith receive ye, but not to doubtful disputable things. For one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak only eats herbs. Let him not that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let him not him which eateth not judge him that he eateth, for God hath received him. Who art thou that judge one man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth. Yea, he shall be holden up, for God is able to make him stand. So all of this so far is in relation to food. One man esteems one day above another, another esteems another day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day regardeth it unto the Lord, and he that regardeth not the day to the Lord, he doth not regard it. That he eateth. Now, the days right there was right there. Nothing about Sabbath, goes right back in the same verse of verse 6 about eating. He that eateth to the Lord, for he giveth thanks, God thanks.
Whoa.
And he that eateth not to the Lord, he eateth not, and giveth God thanks. For none of us liveth to himself, and no man dieth to himself. For whether we live unto the Lord. Whether we die unto the Lord. I'll stop there.
So I'm going to stop you there too. Are you saying now? This is actually epiphany to me. I've never thought about it this way. So in context, this is referring to fast days, and so they go from food to these days that they observe to food. So the whole context here is really food and spirituality.
Yep.
And so chances are it's not even talking about the Sabbath at all in this passage.
Correct. Yeah.
Whoa.
So in the same sense, it's very much like a lot of Calvinist passages. It's not even talking about salvation at all,
Wow, that's really interesting. That has really turned my gears a little bit. I already believe in keeping the Sabbath. All of the people that follow this channel know this. But this is something I never put that together. That is really cool. So let's talk about fasting. Now, something that came to my mind while you were talking about that, Jesus never judged the Pharisees. I challenge one person in the chat. Jesus never criticized the Pharisees for keeping the law.
Correct.
Not once. Not once. But what he did do is he criticized them for heaping human traditions over God's law and usurping God's law with their traditions, and also being hypocritical sinners in the process. And so what we're seeing here is the same issue. Someone with a bunch of traditions that is they're taking above the commandment of God, not to let those traditions overcome your faith in the one true God, in Jesus Christ.
What's interesting to me, this is something that's fascinating. I recently caught this. I haven't made a video on this yet. But the passage, I don't know where it is, but when he's talking to his disciples and the Pharisees are present, he says to them, they sit in the seat of Moses. So do all that they tell you, but do not do as they do. And I'm thinking to myself, well, aren't they teaching all of these like man-made things? Why would Jesus say, do what they've told you to do?
Yeah.
But the context is that he's saying when they sit in the seat of Moses, when someone sat in the seat of Moses and they taught to people, they could only speak what was written from the Old Testament. They could not actually, it's not like teaching like you hear today, like where pastors will read something and then they'll expound upon it, what they are, to help you tell you. They could only just read the scriptures. So Jesus tells them, when they sit in the seat of Moses and they actually read God's word, listen to everything they say. Anything beyond that point, disregard. It's crazy.
Wow. That's really cool. I am so glad, just because that one passage, I am so glad I invited you on the channel. I've never thought about it that way. You learn something new every day, and I love it when I get to learn something that that changes my perspective on things. That's really cool. I'm almost definitely going to be looking into that.